Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode from California Saltwater Fishing. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a pretty interesting trip that we took out on the Ranger 85. It was a freelance trip here at the end of May, so springtime. The islands had been getting blown out quite a bit. We fished the Channel Islands, and they had a few weeks of pretty gnarly winds, so a lot of boats were in harbor for a while, and the water was pretty cold, and the air was pretty cold as a result too. So it was pretty chilly out there, but we still had a good time nonetheless. This video is going to be a little different. It's not going to be so much about the action shots, although there will be some of that at the end. I did catch my first halibut on this trip, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But a subject I wanted to cover is that when we go fishing on these trips, we all go for a different reason. Some of us are out there hunting trophies. Some of us are out there just to, get some fresh seafood. Some of us are just out to get away from work or away from the rigors of the home world and all the things that we have to do in our daily life, and just to simplify our lives. And some of us just want to hang out with friends and do whatever. So we each have a different reason for going out on the water. For me, personally, when I go fishing, it's a communion of sorts. It's a way of connecting with my past. I grew up in a family of 4 boys, the youngest of 4 boys. So I was lucky enough when I was around 5 or 6 years old to get dragged out with my 3 older brothers to go fishing, mostly off of the Santa Monica Pier and some other locations back in the early 80s. And when I got old enough, they invited me out on a trip, actually out of Cisco's Harbor, to fish for the rock cod, back when you could put 15 hooks on one gannion and 5-pound weights and limitless depths that we could fish at, and you could take 20 fish home, all the good stuff that you hear us old timers talk about. So it was a pretty amazing time, and we would go fishing all over whenever we could get the chance, and whenever our mom would give us a little bit of cash to go out there, and it was cheaper than buying the seafood. And we love seafood in the family, and she was always looking for ways to get some fresh food on the table. And when we would go to Santa Monica, she'd even make us bring home the croakers and whatever we caught, just so that we'd have something to eat. It was tough growing up with a single mom with 4 boys, I could imagine. And, she always saw it as a treat whenever we'd bring home something good. And one thing she always wanted us to catch and bring home was a legal halibut. And out of the 4 of us over all those years, we could never manage to get one, even among all of us. And I know that's pretty ridiculous, right? Because I talk to guys who are like, oh yeah, I caught 10 legals in one day, or I always catch a legal halibut every trip I take. And I get it, just sometimes some people have the luck and some don't, and I just never did. And I've been fishing for about 40 years now, and I finally caught my first one, and it was a pretty intense emotional feeling, I must admit, catching that halibut. And when I brought it up, I was so exhilarated at the time that I was catching it, I didn't even bother to turn on the GoPro. So there's not going to be any footage of me actually catching the halibut. There's a little bit of it once it got gaffed and brought onto the deck. And of course, we'll have some pictures coming up of the actual fish itself, kind of how bizarre the head looks and things like that, as well as me holding the fish. But I didn't really get any action shots of it. So I don't want anybody to think that it was clickbait, me having a picture of the halibut on there without much footage of it. But I guess the bigger point is that to me, like I said, the fishing is a communion with my past and a way of connecting with those that are no longer with me. My mother passed away a few years ago. I also have lost 2 of my brothers, and my 3rd brother I've become a bit estranged with, so I have no contact with him. So in a way, when I go fishing, it's my only way to actually have a connection with my family. So it was the oddest thing. After I caught that fish, we were motoring away from that spot on San Miguel Island, and the sun was just starting to come up in the horizon, and I was just overwhelmed with emotion. I was actually just standing there with my, goggles on, my sunproof goggles on, and my hat, and just kind of all, bundled up, and I was tearing up. If I, didn't keep myself in check, I would have been crying like a baby. And it was so amazing, just that feeling that overcomes you when you are in that sort of moment. So that's just kind of what I wanted to share. and just wanted to dedicate this video and that fish to my mom, and hopefully wherever she's at, she's proud, and just wish she could have enjoyed it with the rest of us. So whatever reason you have to go out fishing, keep doing it. Bring the ones you love with you. Bring your kids with you, especially your younger siblings. Get them out there with you, because it's something that stays with you forever. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of this. We'll talk about tying some knots and some stuff with the fish, as well as some shots from the islands. Hope you enjoy it, and leave your comments below. Have a good one. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to tie that single dropper loop that works very well for halibut, white sea bass, anything like that that's feeding on these live squid just off of the bottom. So what you'll do is you'll tie one end of the line. We're just using this Spectra line just for example purposes, but you'd probably actually want to use like a fluorocarbon or a monofilament at the very least. And you'll tie one end to your weight. You can use just a basic uni knot for that. Nothing too fancy there. And for these hooks, we're going to be using this sort of hook, which is actually an Aki Twist 7/0. Owner hooks are my favorite, so that's what I like to go with. And the 7/0 is a good size for most of the stuff you're working with. It just depends on the size of the bait, so you want to make sure that you bring some that may be a little smaller and a little bigger, but 7/0's a good size for especially the type of halibut that we were catching. So what we'll do is you'll want to get a distance between the weight and the hook of about 3 to 4 feet when you're actually doing it, but just for illustration purposes, we'll do it a little shorter. And you want to get just one loop to start with. So you see here we've got this one loop, and then twist your hands like this, holding on one side, twisting with the other, just spinning it around and around and around. You want to give yourself, a few good wraps. 5 or 6 is plenty. This may be even more than enough that we need. And you want to keep this tight so that it's easy to work with. And you're going to run the loop back through at least 3 times. So you'll grab your ends here and pull this one through. So that's through once. Grab it again, pull it through again, twice. Oops. Yeah, see, be careful, it could be a little tricky. Twice, and then another time through 3 times. Oh, it was a little easier when I was younger. So 3 times there, and you got that one through. And grab the loop on its way out. And then you'll straighten it. I typically grab the loop end in my mouth and pull the other 2 ends. Okay, we got it nice and snug. So when you do the actual one, you'll want to make it a bit longer, as I said, but this is just for illustration purposes. So what you've got here is a loop that goes one end down to the weight, one end going up to your pole, and puts it nice and secure and tight right there in the middle. And then for tying this onto the hook itself, you want to make sure that you actually tie a knot onto the hook. So when you're rock fishing or something like that, you can just pass it through and loop it on. But for these guys, you want an actual knot. So what you'll do is you'll take this little end here and pass it through the eye of the hook. So very simple there. Pull it out a bit. As you can see here, we've got one end going this way, one end going that way. Loop it back around, see, looping it, and then pass it back through the loop. Very easy, very simple, back through the loop. And then this end that you have open, you want to run it through the hook. So you poke it through the hook, Being careful not to chip it onto the line because you don't want any nicks. And then you just go ahead and pull on the loop end down, and it gets it nice and snug. So you can see there's actually 2 lines that are holding onto your hook. Gives it a lot of strength. If something gets hooked onto this with this knot here and this knot here, they're not pretty much going anywhere. Excuse the pun. So now you got it set up, and once this line is sitting on the bottom, you can see it's going to have some suspension above the bottom, which is going to keep your bait up in the right position. And like I said, if you have a longer loop on it, the squid or what have you is just going to swim around freely and not really feel the weight on the bottom, and the weight's going to hold it right over the bottom the way you want it. You're typically going to have a little bit of an angle because you're going to be away from the boat, so the bait will be suspended perfectly above the bottom. So that's the basic single dropper loop, and that's pretty much all you need to know about that. I'm sure there's other videos out there that get a better explanation and maybe tie it a little faster. This is what works for me. I'm sure there's lots of different varieties and ways to do it, but that's what worked for me. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And here we have the halibut head, and as you can see, both of the eyes are on one side of the fish's head because they're laying down in the sand most of their life, waiting to ambush prey as they go by. And here you can see quite the stark contrast on the profile of the fish, with the sandy side and then the ghostly white side, and those pretty creepy teeth that accent the features of the fish. So it looks very alien, very cool indeed. But one thing that is beautiful about this fish is the meat that comes off of it. So look at those beautiful fillets there ready for getting thrown in the pan.